On the first part of this final DVD, I'm going to discuss the most important concepts of attack and defence in chess. It's obvious that if you're going to be really good at this game, you've got to be skillful at both attack and defence. And we're going to consider attack first. Now, whole books have been written about the art of attack, but I believe I can reduce the understanding of how to attack into a few simple concepts. The first and most important thing you have to understand is that when you attack, no matter how you attack, you have to go in with everything you've got. This is most important. You have to throw the kitchen sink at your opponent. You have to include every last piece that can be included in the attack. This is the most important thing I can say to you at this point. Successful attack proceeds from either A lead in development. It was Steinitz who formulated the rule that when you're ahead in development, you must attack in order to justify this lead in development. And the idea is that if you don't attack at the right moment when you're ahead in development, the advantage will evaporate and you'll be left with nothing. So timing is of the essence here. And B, successful attacks proceed from an advantage in space. Possibly the two things will combine to furnish a successful attack. But if those considerations are not in place, then it's unlikely that an attack is going to succeed. You see this time and again in the games of the average player. Premature attacks are launched which are not based on solid foundations. And of course the attack founders simply breaks down. So now it's time to look at some games to try and highlight these points and to show you exactly what I mean. And the first of these games comes from the Hastings tournament, very famous tournament played annually in England. In 1972. This is an old game, but it's a classic. Playing white is Wolfgang Ullmann, who was East Germany's #1 player for decades and one of the best players in the world. And playing black, the legendary Vasily Smyslov, an ex-world champion who, even in 1972, was a phenomenally strong player. A man with an incredible instinct for chess. Smyslov is really known as an harmonious player. That is the trademark of his style. Each of the world champions has contributed something to the game, and Smyslov contributed the understanding of harmony in chess, the necessity to coordinate the pieces, and after that to go forward to increase the advantage towards the win. So on the one hand we've got the dynamic Ullmann, and on the other hand we've got the harmonious Smyslov. An exciting contest is guaranteed. Okay, well this is the English opening. It is today. Ullmann's still playing as a veteran. Ullmann's favourite opening with white. Basically, the English opening sets out to control the central square d5. White is saying to black, you won't be able to free yourself unless you can conquer the square d5. And I'm going to do everything in my power to stop you from doing that. So here we see Smyslov just countering with e5 and Ullmann bringing out the knight to d3 and at the same time controlling the d5 square. And now development over the next few moves is very easy to understand. Both sides are bringing out their pieces. This is known as the four knights variation of the English for obvious reasons. It's a straightforward and once again harmonious system of development with black. Black doesn't waste time, he just brings out the piece and prepares to castle. It suits Smyslov's style very well. And white now plays bishop g2. So in the English, once again, we see several white pieces trying to control this square d5. It's so important if you want to tie your opponent down in the opening to try and make him passive in the centre. And this is what the main idea, strategical idea of the English is all about, to force black passive in the centre and to give white a free hand. To build up an advantage in the position. It's a fairly patient way to play with white. But okay, Smyslov is happy. Both sides castle. And now black plays pawn up to e4. Now you may say, well, isn't this a premature attack? Black has scarcely developed his queen side yet, and here he is pushing out aggressively in the centre. And particularly after knight g5, you begin to wonder about the fate of that pawn on e4. Well, Smyslov would answer that e4 is not really an aggressive move. It's a strategical move. And the main idea behind it is that black is going to take on c3 here, which first of all takes away a defender, an attacker of the pawn on e4. And then he's going to play rook e8. And the strategical idea is that the pawn on e4 blocks in that bishop on g2. And when the bishop on g2 is blocked in, black can think about breaking free in the centre with d5, breaking the shackles, and getting a nice free and easy game. So more a strategical move than an attacking move, although I must admit e4 does look very aggressive at first sight. Well, Allman doesn't want any of that and plays f3. This has become one of the main lines in this particular position. Essentially, white doesn't want that pawn on e4, blocking the bishop's way, so he gets rid of it. And the useful thing about f3, another useful thing, is not only does it get rid of the pawn on e4, it opens up the f-file for white's rook. So for the first time in this game, white could be thinking about attacking on the f-file. However unlikely that may seem, it does sometimes happen in this opening, and we're going to see it happens in this game. Now black is not too unhappy about the exchange on f3 because, well, that rook on e8 is now in the game. So it's a bit of a trade-off, and I suppose both sides were reasonably happy at this moment. And Smyslov breaks free in the centre with d5. Alright, c takes d5. Knight takes d5. Of course, white is also happy in this position because he's got two bishops. In the hands of the strong player, two active bishops really do mean quite a lot. The idea is that the two bishops can be used to help furnish an attack a little bit later on down the line. So white is going to be reluctant to give up this advantage in the position. White's two bishops, particularly the dark square bishop, because that's the bishop that that black doesn't have. If white could unleash this bishop on the black king side, for instance maybe against g7, then white would have very good chances of working up a big attack here. Well, okay, on with the show. White plays e4 and black plays knight back to b6. Of course black might have considered capturing on e4, but then the bishop on g2 is free to go along the diagonal. There are lots of black pieces lined up on the diagonal to just be taken by the bishop, and f7 beyond starts to look a bit weak. So for that reason Smyslov retreats the knight to b6. It's a safe move, and well, again, both players can feel happy because white has nudged the black knight out of the centre. Black now has the target of the white centre to aim at. Alright, white played d4. Black brought his bishop out to g4. Smyslov understands only too well the importance of getting the pieces out in this position. White plays pawn up to h3, forcing a decision. Bishop goes to h5. And now white pushes on with e5. And around this phase of the game, I imagine that Allman was starting to think about direct kingside attack. Now, what hopes does white have of a kingside attack? Well, first of all, there are several black pieces on the queen side which are not actually contributing to the defence if white can attack white outright on the king side. If you look at the king side, let's just take a look at it. White has several pieces which can be included in the attack more or less straight away, whereas black isn't really defending with very many pieces at all. That bishop on h5 looks a bit lonely. The rook on e8 has just been blocked in by the pawn on e5. So Allman's starting to think about attack, and e5 creates what we call a wedge in the black camp. The pawn on e5 stops the black pieces from coming to useful defensive positions, and in general cramps black. So this cramping black, this building up of an advantage in space, is the first sign that an attack might be possible for white. And so Allman is now starting to look for aggressive moves against the black king. And this is why Smyslov plays knight d5. He's anxious that the knight comes back into the game to help the defence. Not only that, the knight attacks c3. So black is combining two things with one move. Bishop d2. Actually, you see this phenomenon quite a lot in games between strong players. They manage to combine several things with just one move, one humble move, and yet there are several ideas behind it. Alright, queen to d7. Pawn comes up to g4. Bishop drops back to g6. And now knight comes into g5. Uncovering the bishop on g2. And eyeing the black king side. Added to which, you know, might be also thinking of putting his knight on e4. And then there's a nice little outpost on c5 for the knight. After which the queen, b7, and the knight on d5 all start to look a bit weak and poorly positioned. So black's got to be very careful in this position already. Knight comes to a5. h4. Include every piece possible in the attack. And this is what Smyslov is very worried about. White is pushing forward on the king side. He's threatening to go pawn up to h5, trapping the bishop on g6. Black plays h6, trying to get rid of the knight. And now white pushes on with h5. And there's no doubt about it, black is in danger. As you will see, it's easier for white to swing all his pieces into the attack than it is for black to bring all the pieces to the defence. In particular, I would refer you once again to the black rook on a8 and the black knight on a5. It's going to cost black time to get those pieces back into the game, and Allman's going to use that time to whip up a very vicious assault against black's king. Well, black took the knight. Just dropping back, if he plays bishop takes h5 first, and only then takes the knight, I think a good move here is queen to f3. And if black defends the knight with c6, then we go bishop takes g5. And black is in real danger in this position. I'm very worried about that pawn on g7. The bishop on g5 is now starting to look extremely strong. And white is threatening h6, opening up the black king side rather fatally, I would say. So already after h5, just going back, it does look rather difficult for Smyslov. So he took the knight. White took the bishop. Black recaptured. And now white put his queen out on f3. Now just going back, there is an extraordinary idea here which is concealed in the position. You don't see a move like queen a4 very often. So I wonder why Allman rejected that move. I mean, it may well have been that this move is so extraordinary that he actually didn't see it. And the main point of it is that after queen takes a4, bishop takes d5 check, king h7, and now rook f2, extraordinarily forces checkmate. No matter what black plays in this position, he can't stop h2. Well, he can sort of stop it by sacrificing all his pieces. He can delay it, but the black king is trapped in a corridor of his own pawns there. You don't see that opportunity very often coming up on the chessboard. Going back to queen a4, I suppose black could block with knight c6, but then queen b5 teams up with the bishop on g2 incredibly effectively, and black is under pressure on both d5 and b7. Probably knight b6 is his only move, and now white lands a vicious check, so that if rook e6, white can move in with the fork. d5, knight a5, d takes e6, a further queen sacrifice, queen takes d2, and now the simple move queen d1, after which white is a decisive amount of material ahead. Now if we just drop back to f takes g6, that was a very sudden attack, a very remarkable and abrupt variation. Why is black getting into trouble? Well, he's struggling against two bishops. He's opened up his king. That capture on g6 was most undesirable because the black king is now very weak on the light squares. And as I've said before, two black pieces are offside. So there are definite signs in any chess position that an attack might be possible. And I hope I've pointed out to you the considerations for white to take into account in this position before he actually plays a move. Now queen a4 may have been possible. Of course the move Allman plays, queen f3, is also perfectly possible. It's a very good move. White attacks the knight on d5, and he's got very dangerous pressure on both g5 and the f-file. Black's move is forced, c6, and now white simply takes on g5 with the bishop. This is a bit better for black than the line I just showed, where black played bishop takes h5, because white has no pawn on h5 to be able to open up the black king with h6. But on the other hand, the black knights are a long way from the defence, and as we will see, white now manages to include every single piece in the concluding attack, which Smyslov really is hard pressed to counter. So queen h3. Okay, white is thinking about action against the black king. Queen e6. Rook f2. White is thinking about including the last piece in the attack. Rook f8, countering on the file. Bishop f3. No way does white want exchange in this position, even to the extent of giving black a pawn. White includes his last piece in the attack. This is Ullmann's overall plan. He's threatening rook h2. That in turn threatens queen to either h8 or h7, which is pretty lethal. I'm not sure that Smyslov has any defence against this plan. It's remarkable how helpless the knights are against this attacking idea. And look at the rook on a8. Hasn't moved. Does nothing. Rook takes f3 was the only solution black can find. Obviously, just going back, if knight d5 by black, let's say, white just goes rook h2, and mate is not far away. So after rook af1, rook takes f3 was played. Queen takes f3. Knight b5. No need for fancy stuff now. Knight takes d4. And then the beautiful move, queen f8. After which the ex-world champion resigned. A superb finish. What happens next? Well, black will take the rook if he desires to do so. King goes to h7, and then we get that beautiful corridor mate once again with rook h1. So that was a superb demonstration of how to work up an attack. In the end, Ullmann increased the pressure by bringing every last piece into the attack, and even the ex-world champion Smyslov was quite unable to defend. So a very good example of attacking with everything you have.